always believed that everyone has a story and that everyone's story has value. I'm Joanna Peña-Bickley, the host of Designed By, a new Designed By Us documentary series that recognizes the changemakers, imagineers, and inventors in STEAMed science, technology, engineering, arts, math, and design. As I have traveled the globe and collaborated with some of the world's leading scientists, artists, and mathematicians, I know that daring to design the future today all begins with a vision and a narrative of a hopeful future. I invite you to join us on a journey of discovery, finding the voices and magic makers, changing the very shape of our future. There are very few times, I think, in life where somebody leaves a mark on you, not just on what you believe, but that the world is full of possibility. And Mara did that for me. And so I think that inevitably, I probably took more away from our interaction in Cannes than you may have taken from me. And it's when I said, why do more people need to know about Mara? And I think so much about this is your journey. So Mara, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the great intro. I'm just like, some people might feel really awkward with compliments. So I'm one of them. I'm like, hey. So my name is Mara. I'm Mara Leqcoc. I'm brand and community director at Fishbowl. And in my previous life, I was an ad agency creative director, and I worked in New York at AKQA, 72 and Sunny, Sunday, in Canada as well, Tribal DDB, and in Paris at BETC. And I also grew up in the Philippines. So if people ask me where I'm from, I'm like, okay, how long do you have? Because it's a bit complicated.
So let me start with that one. Where are you from? What an eclectic background, right? But I always think about where we're from often tells us where we might be going.
Yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, so I was born and raised in the Philippines. I'm half French, half Filipino for 14 years. And I spent the second half of my life in Paris for the next 14 years. I have sort of both angles in my personality. And I think my sort of Cartesian mind couldn't stand the idea that I could be more French than Filipino. So after 14 years in the Philippines and 14 years in France, I was like, that's it. I need to leave.
Talk to me about that journey between the Philippines and France. How old were you?
14.
Okay, so at 14, why leave the Philippines?
So for those who were in Southeast Asia or felt the impact around the world, in 1997, there was a crisis in Southeast Asia. And so a lot of businesses folded or went abroad. And my mom was part of a company and had to leave. And she's French, so she always wanted me to go live in France. So she's like, oh, this is a great opportunity anyway. And it's time to go back to the other half of your roots.
That's a really interesting trajectory. You go from the Philippines to France, you land in France, and you're in Paris. You get there. What was that like?
Well, I was in the French school in the Philippines, and it was a really tiny school. So when you're a teenager and you only have like 7 other students in your class, and you arrive in a country where there's so many people your age, and then puberty is just like exploding, I was just really happy. I was just like, wow, all these human beings my age who speak my language. I was blown away and excited.
At what point did you realize, in such a creative city, that you were a creator, an inventor, a designer, that you had this desire to make things new?
Well, actually, I think it started young. I was fortunate to have parents who had creative minds. So I've always developed this sort of creative side of myself, but without thinking that I was going to be a creative. I thought more that I was going to be a scientific, like follow scientific studies, because at the same time, my dad he bought a computer before I was born. So, and I'm an only child. So my only sibling was a computer. So I was very obsessed and very geeky. He taught me how to code, actually to like programming languages, like BASIC and things like that, like, in the late 80s, early 90s. And by the age of 12, I think in 1995, He bought me a book on how to code HTML3. And that's really like, that was a key part of my sort of my youth, because it really opened all these doors for me. And I created my first website from scratch using Notepad in 1995. And and so I also like the creative side, but I thought, back then we would call ourselves like webmasters. So I was like, I want to be a webmaster. And anyway, high school comes, and in France you have to choose your specialty. So it's either literature, it's science, or economics. And I chose science. So I was on my way like science. But then in the last year of high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I went to see how do you call this? I know the word in French, but like the person who orients you. And that person said, oh, just seeing your, dual profile, you should do multimedia. I was like, oh, okay. And so that's how I got into art school with a focus on design and multimedia digital. So anyway, all this to say that creativity has always been part of my life. And even on just sort of problem solving creatively without using, a paintbrush.
So can you talk maybe about some of the problem spaces that have just encompassed you?
Actually I have two. And maybe that's also how we ended up meeting. I think with See It, Be It, also, just looking at the type of work that you do. As I was moving up in my career in advertising, and I'm going to say things that are just very common to hear now, but lack of role models was prevalent. As a aspiring creative director, as a creative director, and thanks to the 3% conference, the number has gone up. But part of the things that when I was at AKQA, which is creativity and technology, people were like, oh, it's so hard to find women. We'd love to find women like you, having that digital side and that creative side. And I was like, the thing is, the reason why I'm here is because I grew up super geeky. And so I was also, I was 12 years in my career, wanting a sense of purpose and impact. I decided to take a sabbatical and to solve this problem that girls lacked role models in their formative years that could have an impact on their aspirations. And so I created with a team of people who were my former coworkers at AKQA, and we created Secret Code, which is a customizable children's book that stars your girl as a tech hero. And so that was something that took, a couple of years of my life. It was such an amazing adventure because I also learned so much about entrepreneurship. Thankfully, put Secret Code on the map. That's how I started getting a lot of PR, and just other things started unfolding. And what was the most fulfilling was to see it actually work, and parents telling me, I gave Secret Code to my 6-year-old who hated science, and now she wants to take robot camp and she plays engineer. And the secret sauce to what I did was just like I made technology cool. You have a beautiful, powerful princess and who has magical powers. And then, I think a lot of, technology literature for kids, it's kind of like, a girl wearing overalls. You're like, I'd rather be cool and have a cool dress or something. So that was, part of the creativity of this too, was on styling. So this little girl, she has a pink tutu and a badass biker jacket. So it's just to show you can be feminine and an engineer. And so that was the first project that I felt like I solved a problem with. It was 1,000 girls who got the book.
That's a fantastic story. What was the second? Tell me a little bit about the second, because that's remarkable, right? You're giving. I look at it and think about, wow, that problem space, continues. We live that space, right? And we increase the numbers in your contribution to little girls everywhere who now see themselves as makers, as doers, as creators, as capable of demystifying technology in a way that makes them the hero.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
So that's a really tough problem to solve. What do you do to top that?
Well, I think it's just changing demographic and needs. So the second one is way less creative in a traditional sense, and it was also how I started my relationship with Fishbowl. So I was a very addicted Fishbowl user, and I kept on seeing. I just loved, the honesty there and the different communities. So the Women in Advertising Bowl is, it's like a warm hug where you can just like talk about your challenges and just get a lot of empathy and understanding and solutions too. And I kept on seeing, where are the female-led agencies? Like, do they exist? Like, I'm at a male-dominated workplace, and I'm just looking for role models. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to start a spreadsheet, and it's going to be real quick. I was doing secret code, and I was freelancing at the same time, so it was very irresponsible actually because it took me a lot of time, but it was very fulfilling. So I posted this spreadsheet in open access on Fishbowl, and it sort of blew up from there, where everyone started adding their bosses and the people they knew. And soon after, it actually started with 5 I knew of. I'm like, I only know 5 women. And I'm talking about senior leaders. And soon after, a woman reached out to me, and who's now my co-founder. And we both created Where Are the Boss Ladies, which is the largest database of senior women leaders in advertising, with the goal of providing women with role models to work for. And thanks to her, we were able to transfer the very crude spreadsheet to Airtable. Do you use Airtable? I don't.
Oh, I don't.
Okay.
Actually. I don't. What is Airtable?
So Airtable is like Spreadsheets 2.0. It's like Squarespace of spreadsheets, let's say, where it's where I think the main feature is that you can embed a spreadsheet on a website. That's super practical, and it makes for a user-friendly experience without investing, thousands in technology. And now, we have, thanks to the power of crowdsourcing and online communities, we have more than 1,000 leaders that women can go work for. And it's been so heartwarming to see women just write messages and say, oh, this has given me hope. I had no idea there were so many women of color, because we have different categories, and you actually can find the women of color in advertising in these leadership positions. And on the other side, these women, these senior women, have been reached out by really awesome companies too. One of them, especially like in our industry, creatives get all the spotlight, which, good for us. But then, for people who are busting their ass, like as strategists or as account people, they rarely get credit. And so it's been so heartwarming to hear women who on the account side tell me like, oh, Netflix just reached out to me, and I don't, I'm nowhere else than on your list. So I think it comes from you. And so those are the things that also bring fulfillment. So it's more on the practical side, but what I like too is just to see the immediate impact.
That is so phenomenal. Tell me why it was so important to you. I mean, I think that we both share that we're both female. That's helpful,
Yeah.
right? And seeing female leaders but why was this so deeply important to you to dive into this space?
So this might get into a therapy session. So I think definitely the lack of role models that I've had. So in 15 years, I've had 17 male bosses and 0 women. It's never been a problem with me. I've always sort of like, that's just my normal to have male leaders. But when it started having an impact on me was, I think, in my early 30s, when you're starting to think of the next phase in life, and you see your 40, 50-year-old bosses being workaholics and staying over the weekend. And I would always like feel sorry for them. I'm like, don't you have a family? Like, shouldn't be with, why are you on this Google Hangout with me? Shouldn't be with your wife right now. Take care of your wife. and I felt like, I don't know, I feel like maybe a woman would, draw these boundaries better. And I was really thirsty for a female role model for those reasons. I just want to know, like, is it possible to kill it with children and just be ambitious and everything and have a family? Because I feel like it's not. So that's why I wanted to create that list. But even beyond that, that's where I was talking about therapy. I lost my mother when I was 17. and she was kind of like my boss lady of my life. And I think ever since I've looked at my leaders, my male bosses, as sort of, a replacement of that figure of, authority and guidance for life. So I was like, I think it's just like the people in my life are my husband and my dad, and my male bosses. I'm like, I'm surrounded by guys all the time. I need some female presence.
That is beautiful. I mean, I think losing a parent, losing anybody that you love, right? But losing a parent at such an early age, at such an influential age, often I do believe that we as women sometimes forget that at 17 we knew nothing. If you look now into what we know now versus what we knew then, I knew so very little at 17 and probably wasn't nearly appreciative of enough. I think that's a profound purpose, to understand that there are a lot of people in this world that don't have enough of that that perspective to go in and say, these are problem spaces that I think that I can solve for, and I can't possibly be the only one that's having this issue. You talked about something I thought was really interesting, which was you were seeing people model behavior that felt untenable for you. Bosses. I'm certainly, one of them who's, it's a workaholic. I am one of those women who was a leader, who is a workaholic, but not because for any other reason. It was the desire to try to solve the problem that I was into right at that point.
Yes.
But it becomes an interesting thing that I think that you talked about, which was modeling behavior that didn't feel sustainable.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Talk to me a little about what you saw.
Yes. I love that you bring this up because I'm a workaholic too. So if I have a workaholic role model, it just feels like, a crack den or something. It's like, this is unhealthy. We're both like, so I feel like right now I feel finally feel balance and a sense of like taking control of my life, because I'm in a workplace culture that values work-life balance. And I think we're all, we all have different personalities. I need my boss to tell me to go home, because if they don't, if they're like, Maria, can you help? I'll be like, yes, I will absolutely help. Like, I'm just sort of, I don't know, if I compare myself to an animal, I think I'd be like a dog. I'm just like, yes, master, I'm with you. And I'm here to support you and defend you until the end. So I need role models who just like calm me down. I guess that's where the sort of motherhood thing comes back in. It's like, okay, you've done enough, now go to bed. And, I always thought that with age, I'd probably mature. Oh, it's like, maybe it's because I'm young. But I don't think I'm going to change. I'm 36 now. I think, at 40, I'll be the same. At 50, I'll be the same. I'll be probably like wiser, more mature and everything. But yeah, it's important for me to have a role model who has this healthy behavior, because I'm going to reproduce the unhealthy behavior.
I think that's really important insight that, when you see those things in your space every day, we all have that natural inclination. By the way, you won't change. I will tell you, I am still the same person. I was in my 30s. I am now in my 40s. Am I a little bit wiser? Yeah. Do I have a little less energy? No, I don't think I have less energy, but I feel more purposeful in the way that I direct the energy. I think I've gotten smarter about how to direct the energy.
I love that. That's so inspiring.
And who deserves that energy? That's the other part. Is that, sometimes you get modeled in behavior, you go, is the energy that I'm putting into the world, right? Is it worthy of the task that I'm taking on? And so often, I think the maturing process is that you learn those lessons in really weird ways.
Yeah. Through challenging times.
Absolutely. Especially in challenging times like this, right? And where, I think we took for granted physical proximity to each other. And, and that this is the new norm, right? How do we keep the emotion and keep that space healthy, right? Because it becomes very easy. And if you're a workaholic and you love what you do, and here's the thing, I'm not addicted to work. I'm addicted to solving the problem.
Yeah. And it's enjoyable. So yeah.
Absolutely. So you talked a little bit about, hey, you get through these problem spaces. You're on Madison Avenue and doing, the AKQA. I go riding that pony, because Madison Avenue is a hell of a horse to ride. I certainly did it myself for some time. What was it that went, I'm going to go from talking about things to making things? Because obviously we're making a message. And I think that's, it can't be underestimated that making a message is really tough, and being consistent at it is really important. But how do you go from advertising into the world that you're in today, which tends to be more, it might be more brand, but brand is product.
It's product, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, it's thanks to the experiments I had, because these 2 years, I mean, I was 12 years in my career, and it's been sort of on my mind. I think when I hit the 10-year mark, I was like, yeah, is this sustainable for me? Is this career really made for me? Am I really that fulfilled in this career? But sort of, like continued your days. And I read a book. It's called The Crossroads of Should and Must by El Luna. And I bought it on a Saturday. I read it on a Saturday. There's this exercise in there that asked you to describe your life in a eulogy. And Mara climbed up the ladder at a giant holding company, never saw her family, made money, retired, and died. And then I resigned on Monday, and Wednesday was my last day.
Today's episode is sponsored in part by Design by Us. DesignByUs.org is a civic media and public service design cooperative on a mission to create equal and equitable representation in science, technology, engineering, the arts, math, and design. We call that STEAMed. All you have to do is go to your phone or computer and type in designbyus.org and explore how public works and productions educate, equip underrepresented communities with a hands-on STEAMed experience they need to prosper in the global job market. So let's help Design by Us advance inclusive, equitable, and a prosperous future for over 10 million women, girls, and underrepresented communities with a donation. Take a moment and visit designbyus.org/donate. That's designbyus.org/donate.
And so that's sort of, the trigger. And this idea for Secret Code had been in my mind for a while. And thanks to advertising, I mean, everything, the future I'm in today, the present I'm in today is thanks to advertising. I am so thankful of everything we've learned, the work ethic that we've learned, the people we've met, the super smart people and of all backgrounds. Like my previous agency at BTC, the founder said, an ad agency is like a circus. We all have like our superpowers, and we're all so different, but we need to put a show together. And so thanks to an advertising brief for Verizon, and it was on raising awareness on the lack of women in STEM. And that was in 2014, was before Like a Girl, it's like when it all started. That's sort of how it woke me up to these issues. And that's where I was like, okay, I want to do this customizable children's book. And so I went on this journey. And then I also did Where Are the Boss Ladies a year later. And I was also, just for the listeners, like, how did I sustain myself? I was freelancing. So that's also advice I give. So, I was working maybe half the year or even a third of the year. And I was able to pay, I was my own angel investor, let's say. And then 2 years later, I was very active on Fishbowl. And, thanks to the Where Are the Boss Ladies program that we did, I got to meet the founders and the team. And they were they were such like kind, empathetic. I have never seen like such empathetic people. I mean, guys. and at the end, we started, working together. And that's also things that, I think what has helped me sort of move forward in my career or personal projects is just to, be helpful with others who need your help and just add value. So I was like, hey, let me help you with that deck. Let me just clean up that deck and like, let me introduce you to folks and no agenda and everything. But I started building that relationship. And at the end of 2018, I reached out. I was like, do you have a job for me? And they said, no, but let's brainstorm. Why not? And we brainstormed on this role. I created that title because that's what I thought they needed. And I joined the team 3 months later. And so that's how I transitioned from advertising to brand side.
And I think it is so profound that you wrote your eulogy. If you had to write your eulogy again today, would it be different?
Yes, so different. I'd be psyched. Because I realize, with age, it's like, I just love experiences and just knowing that I won't do the same thing forever. Like right now, I could do this forever. I've never felt this way about something. And I think it's because endless, possibility of creativity, let's say.
Talk to me about what you're making today. What are the problem spaces you're solving for?
So, okay, I'm thinking about the outside the day-to-day stuff. Well, yeah, so no, that's a very interesting question. So Fishbowl, for those who don't know, it's a social network for professionals of the same industry to have honest conversations about work semi-anonymously. And what's cool is that you can post as your company or as your job title and not both at the same time. So it gives you the safety of asking questions that you would maybe be embarrassed about. Like, this is how much I'm making. Is this normal? Or I'm managing somebody who's difficult. Can anybody give me advice? While giving enough context, if you post as your job title, to who you are. So if you are a junior art director or a CCO, then you kind of understand where that person's coming from. What I realize, it's like, well, industries are like cultures. We even have a brief for moderators, because we have moderators on the platform to make sure the community stays positive, and they need to understand the personalities. And it's so interesting because it's like reading a horoscope of industries. And so each industry has their own issues or, idiosyncrasies. And for example, the advertising industry, there was a bit of PTSD from agency spy back in the day. And so my job the past year is to reassure people that this is not Agency Spy Part 2. And what's been fascinating is that other industries don't have that issue at all. They have other issues. For example, in other industries, you realize that advertising is really super woke and like really, I think, thank you, the 3% conference, because consulting doesn't have a 3% conference. Law does not have one, and accounting and finance, and you can see the difference in the conversations. And for example, in the Women in Advertising Bowl, you'd have things like, oh, I can't believe this microaggression, this is what I told him, blah. In law, it's like, my manager keeps on giving me massages, but I don't think he's doing it in a really pervy way. Do you have any advice on how to make him stop? And they're just so like, it's almost like they're shy of saying things like that. They're like, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but you know what I mean? It's so absurd, the differences. So those are other challenges in other industries where it's way more male dominated and more like single-minded. And so we need to help these, let's say, less progressive, typical, lawyers or male lawyers or consultants be more open-minded about the world.
That's a fantastic topic, I think, that we stumbled into. How do you take that creativity and the energy and the positivity that you have and impact an industry in a way that maybe is one part a bit of awakening, but also part of giving people permission to say, this is going on and I'm not sure if it's right, without being judgmental? How do you go about impressing upon some of this is about listening and giving people permission to share this information?
And also making everyone feel safe to share opinions that are maybe, frowned upon in public. There's so many conversations on Fishbowl where it starts with somebody who's like, I feel like I'm punished for being a white male these days. And then everybody's just like jumping on it, but not in a necessarily aggressive way. It's more like, okay, let me explain. Okay, this is the history of blah. And what's great about not feeling personally attacked is that you have a more open mind. So for example, if you're attacked on Twitter, you're going to be like on your high horse, like, this is what I think. And this is the very polished answer that I'm going to give. But what's great about Fishbowl is that when you learn from others, it's not at the expense of your reputation. Nobody's going to think that, oh, you were dumb for saying that, because nobody knows who you are. And so what we often see is those people who start with these, sort of provocative messages, they respond, they're like, thank you for taking the time to explain me these things, because I didn't really understand it, but with your perspective, it has helped me. And so that's sort of like a great case, and other cases, maybe people don't respond, but I know it plants a seed, because they're just, it's never immediate. It can take a few weeks. AOC was saying, I think recently, or at a conference, she was giving sort of how her strategy on how to persuade people on a different political side. And she's like, you have to treat them with kindness, and you have to just, for me, explain your point of view. This is what I think, share your passion, but leave them a golden exit. Don't berate them. Don't make them feel shame. And often what happens to me is that several weeks later, I bump into them again and they tell me, you know what, you said something the other day and made me think, and this is what I think now. So I believe in that, and just that patience and allowing people to be stupid. I think because I've tried, it's my fourth country, I have to learn to adapt to a new culture. And I've made stupid things in every country, and I'm so happy people just explain things to me very simply.
Absolutely. And I think in that space, talk to me a little bit about the sacrifices that you had to make and keeping that conversation going. Because at some point, you get to, as I certainly have found myself, that you get a place of anger. What do you mean this is happening to you, right?
Yeah.
But anger in of itself isn't approachable.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's often the emotion that people go, whoa, 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 angry, creative, whoa, back the heck off, right? And so sometimes you have to kind of sacrifice in yourself. What do you bring or sacrifice when you're bringing something to that conversation?
Well, I think also maybe it depends on the personalities of each. I don't feel like it's a sacrifice. Actually, I wish I could get more angry. That has always been my fantasy. I think because my mom was she's very French and very straightforward and and proud, and she would get angry, no problem. I'm going to make a scandal right here, right now. And I think maybe I was and I just never became that, even if I sort of fantasized on that. I'm like, oh, I'd love to put my fist on the table and show my authority. But, as a survival instinct, since I couldn't do that, I just had my own ways. I think all my life I was a bit insecure. I was like, oh, is it me being weak or whatever? But I think it's just, we all have our own strategies and personalities. And that's how I got things, by being kind.
I think that's a really important message, and I think a really important way of being, that if your intention is kindness, what the end result might be kindness back. Because I think often I tend to try to be deliberate about what I put in the world, because what I didn't realize is that those of us who are creators have this, it's our superpower, and we're natural leaders. And, if I'm having a bad day, I actually have the power to make a lot of people have a bad day. And you don't want to put that into the world. That isn't your intention, right? And so I come from a place of just thinking about it from, what is the intent that you're putting into the world? Because you will receive it back. I have, for all the bad intentions I have put out in the world, karma is not nice. It has a way of coming back and, hitting you back in your face in a really interesting way. And so I love that, your part of it has been one, I think I don't think it's, one would say, oh, young or naive, but it seems like that kindness and clarity that you're bringing to people, the intention is purposeful. It certainly seems that way. So you go from Madison Avenue, you get to this space, you're in tech. I mean, boy, are you in the thick of tech. What has been the secret to making those decisions? I would call it what's your secret sauce?
Great question. I think I just have very low tolerance for for negative situations. And I think as creatives, we're very emotional. So I feel emotions, some people are like, yeah, but it's comfortable. You have a job, you have a paycheck. I'm like, but I can't stand this. And so I think it's just like, letting my emotions dictate how trust my emotions, let's say, and then obviously use my brain to make sure it all makes sense. But yeah, I mean, I think I compare it to relationships. Yeah, and also we all have different personalities. Like, and for me, it's like the minute something is not going right, I just explode. So I think that's maybe part of my secret sauce, is to let things explode if I don't like them. And so those are the things that push me. For example, like that book. It's like quitting one business day after reading it. That's just who I am, because but it wasn't just irrational. It's been an accumulation of events for 6 years, whatever, a few years before that. So yeah, I guess just trusting your gut. I mean, this is very stereotypical, but yeah, trusting that it's telling you something, and it's okay if you don't act upon it right away, because some people might feel guilty, like, oh, I'm not doing enough fast enough. It's like, yeah, it took me years to act on it. And when I acted on it, now I'm happy.
Oh, I love that. I really love that. You talked about trusting your gut. And it's really interesting because I have found and working, and this is that so often I think that we as women have an intuition.
Mm-hmm.
It's a gift. It's a curse. It's a gift, right? And I think that's what you mean by when you talk about trusting your gut. Dive deep into that one for me.
Yes. I'm sharing this message of empathy. Like, it doesn't have to be black and white. Like, I trust my gut and I do something and it's amazing. It's like making mistakes is just part of the journey. And so, so, when that story actually, where I resigned on Monday and Wednesday was my last day, the agency came back to me and was like, please stay. We'll give you all the money you want, the title you want, da 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 da. And that's where I knew my heart was made, but I accepted. I was like, okay, fine. Maybe I just need some time off. And so I did take that time off, and I started, working on Secret Code for a couple of months. I came back, I felt really refreshed. I was like, yes, this is exactly what I needed. Silly me to want to like question everything, my whole entire existence. I just needed a break and I feel great. However, similar problems sort of like came back. And so I was like, oh, here we go again. So, and it's not about an agency in particular. It's really, just the system. So that's a moment where I trusted my gut at first, and then I went back. That's also like one of my things to work on, is that often I'm just like, no, or yes. And then like a second later, I'm like, how about no, I'm going back to this decision. I'm not sure. But in the end, it all worked out because I was able to build another experience that was really valuable for me. So I always see, and I'm sure you think the same, it's like any experience, like even any shitty experience is actually amazing. You learn something from it, you meet people, like it's always beneficial.
I've equated it to that mistakes aren't really mistakes. They're moments of learning.
Yeah, exactly.
I think so often we as females in this space hold ourselves to ridiculous standards.
Yeah, yes. I wonder where that comes from. It's just a lifetime of little comments and questions.
I think it very well could be. And I think a part of that, of trusting your gut, that it is in that I have found that it's trusting that I realize that the decisions I'm making is because I actually don't know or feel too comfortable in a space. And now I'm bored. I've ceased learning.
It's so interesting to also not really understand what you really want or what society has brainwashed you to want. And I've never been the one obsessed with money and titles. I don't know. I think it's arriving in New York. Everybody's like, Mara, you should have this title. You should make this much. They're taking advantage of you. Do you realize that? And I'm like, really? Are they taking advantage of me? And so I started like feeling that, oh, that's very important. So I'm gonna gun for that. And I gunned for it. I got everything I wanted. I was like on the coolest client, like everything, it just sounded fabulous. But I realized as soon as I got it, like, actually, this is not what I want. And even if on paper, when I introduce myself to people, it sounds like the coolest thing ever, it's not me. And so that's where I ended up doing something completely different. And I was good at it. I got, all the cool things that happen when you start a cool initiative. But I also questioned who I was because people started introducing me as a children's book author. And I was like, well, that's not who I am. It's like, I mean, the children's book is a device to get to diversity in the workplace later on in your career. I'm not really a children's book author. I don't think you understand me. And it was a very torturous moment for me because I had been accepted at an accelerator program by the Rent the Runway Foundation and UBS. It was like, 12 out of 700. And it was like a big deal. And I was around these amazing young women CEOs who who have raised millions since. It was a horrible feeling because I felt like, I was meeting all these amazing people in entrepreneurs and CEOs of prominent female CEOs and everything who were believing in me and giving advice and, telling me that I could get there. And deep down I was like, actually it's almost like I felt closeted. Like, this is not actually who I am. And that was part of the hard decision at the end of 2018 is because I had, it's like all the advice, fake it till you make it. So I was just like, pretending that, this is what I'm doing, not really pretending, but I guess taking on that role and saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and and I'm going to raise. And I just fell off this like cliff or something because I felt like I was disappointing like these sort of thought leaders of, of the entrepreneurial world by not doing what I said I was going to do, kind of like, oh, she's not keeping her promises. So that was a moment also about figuring out who I was. And I realized, so after all these experiments, that I just care about the marginalized. It's always been in what I love. Like when I was a kid, I would always talk to the kid in class who had no friends. That was my first goal. Even at a party in high school, it's like high school popular kids, like they're fine, they don't need me. So, but I would go in the corner and talk to that lonely kid, and I think that's sort of how I realized by experimenting these things and thinking and realizing this is not really who I am. Now I found finally who I am, and this role at Fishbowl and helping so many people in the marginalized in their professional development. That's where I'm really thriving now.
Fabulous. That's fabulous. So you're in this, it seems like a really good space. What inspires you?
Actually, it's conversations with people, talking to friends. When I was in advertising, I just loved conversations with people who weren't in advertising because that's where a lot of great ideas come. It's like, when your cousin says blah, 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 and it's like, oh, that's a great insight. I've never heard of this. Or, comedy shows, which is also like mainstream culture. I just love empathizing and learning cultures. That's what inspires me right now.
So along that same line, who inspires you?
It's a tough question because I think people who inspire me are normal people. I just find them more interesting. I'd rather talk to my neighbor on the sidewalk. I find him more interesting than, an icon at a TED Talk. Because we have access to all this information and all these, it's like when you want to learn from an iconic person, you just go on YouTube. But so today I just more fascinated by the, everyday person with their sort of deep, weird challenges that they don't dare really talk about.
Love that. Just love that. So in a world that's spinning so fast and sometimes maybe feels a little slow now that we're all in COVID mode, what are the books that you're reading?
Well, speaking of COVID mode, I've been taking advantage of this time to, personal growth, and writing has always been on the back of my mind. I was sharing that my parents were writers. So I think this thing that kind of just always there. So I'm taking writing classes, and through Gotham at Gotham Writers. I don't know if you know them. It's so cool. And so right now specifically, I'm reading a lot of books on writing.
Fantastic. If there was one thing that you learned on this journey up until this point, because life is that journey, what do you think it would be?
I think it goes back to what I said earlier. That feels stereotypical, but it's just like your gut speaks volumes. Because sometimes it took me 10 years to decide something that I knew 10 years ago was right, but I couldn't bring myself to it. And then 10 years later, it's like, I was right all along. But, same thing. It's like, without giving, because I also empathize with people who, are maybe stuck in situations, who have mortgages, who have kids, and they can't make the change that I made. And I especially don't want them to think like, oh, it's so easy. Just quit your job and just do what you love, because we don't have all that situation. So I think it's everyone in their own time. And it took me 14 years to be happy in my job. And that may seem long for somebody who's 2 years in. That may seem short for somebody who's 20 years in. So we all have our own, lifetime.
And so as we wrap up, do you have any parting thoughts to help, kind of put that nugget, maybe that one thing that you've learned, or, those parting thoughts, to this audience? What gives you hope?
Being kind and generous took me so many places, and entitlement takes you nowhere. And what makes me sad is when I see young people who are entitled, I'm like, oh, this is not going to, make you advance, in your career as you wish you would. And, just so many situations of people who are like, oh, I'm not going to take this job because XYZ, because, and even, this is a very contentious topic on being paid. I think there's a lot of talk about, no, everybody should be paid. And, on paper, yes, everybody should be paid. And I'm not talking about like, people our age, but, in your early 20s, when you're still learning, when you're still like not really good at what you do, I always encourage to volunteer and share your skills with people who need it, because you never know what's going to happen. And don't expect them to pay. Don't expect everyone to pay you the way, big brands could pay you or a big agency could pay you. I have so many like situations, or, in the beginning of my career, I was 21. I was doing flyers for events for free in the beginning. And people were like, you're not being paid, you're being taken advantage of it. And so, but after my 5th flyer that was unpaid, I started hitting up bigger events, and I scored like the event that I love to go to. It was like very respected in Paris. I was so proud, and and there I got paid because I was able to show them my 5 previous sort of portfolio examples that made me look legit. And when I see people who are like, off the bat, it's like, no, I'm not going to do anything, and it's like they didn't go as far as fast. So I think it doesn't have to be like I'm talking about money, but even the fact that I'm at Fishbowl now is because for 6 months, I was just like, oh, let me clean up your deck. Let me help you this. Let me give you advice on that. It was free. And so when I asked for a job, it was immediate. They said yes. I mean, they said no, but they said yes a week later. But, whereas if I had come in and been like, oh, hi, I'm Mara. This is the salary I want. Like, nah, they wouldn't have listened to me.
Thank you so much for joining me on this journey today. I invite you to join us on the next episode as we discover the voices and magic makers changing the very shape of our future by design.